Well, another day has come and gone, and we still don't have a Pac-12 media deal. But you know what we do have is an impending football season in which the Pac-12 is once again poised to miss the playoff.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights-free and beloved Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please and thank you wherever you're listening to or watching the show. I have no preference, by the way, where you are, who you are, however you're consuming the show. I just appreciate you for doing so, especially all of you everydayers out there. An outside the box topic that one day might not be so outside the box coming later in the show, and a little bit more Arizona discussion because it is warranted. But the playoff is something that has eluded the Pac-12 in every college football season since 2016. You know, when they first announced that they were going to move to the 14 playoff, it looked like, hey, the Pac-12 could get a team in there. Hey, look, it's the first year of the playoff. The Pac-12's got a team in there, that being Oregon. And then they missed it for a year. And then the next year was, hey, look, we've got another team in there. Hey, this getting to the playoff thing, this is feasible. Is this going to give the Pac-12 a chance at a national championship for the first time since USC in 2005? Is this going to be the time when the Pac-12 finally breaks through once again? We're in the playoff 2 of the first 3 years. And here we are in 2023, and we haven't been there in 7 years. It's not great. It's not great. Great line from The Big Short there when he asks him, this makes us look bad that we didn't know how much was required to get an ISDA agreement. And the guy goes, it's not great. It's not great. So when you're talking about the playoff, and the propensity of the Pac-12, their ability to just miss it year after year and just cannibalize themselves, we have an uncanny ability to do just that. We have an uncanny ability to cannibalize one another. That's kind of our MO. That is standard operating procedure for the Pac-12, and we're set up to do it once again this year. Now, does that mean I'm any less excited for this Pac-12 football season? Absolutely, positively not. Because college football has always been about more than just the national championship that season, which is the ultimate goal, for sure. But in the context of a season, you can play for a lot that doesn't necessarily pertain to the playoff. And the Pac-12 this year is going to have so many great teams, and so many great matchups, and so many big-time games. And you will have teams vying for playoff spots. You absolutely will. But as was the case a year ago, I am once again going to officially predict on the record right here, right now, that barring some significant changes, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't think the Pac-12 is getting a team into the playoff this year. Because the Pac-12 has a lot of really good teams. I don't know if there's a dominant team in there. Because that's what you need. In the 4-team playoff era, which is what makes college football so great, and why I'm opposed to a 12-team playoff, you devalue the regular season. That is an unquestioned reality. People can like it. People can think that's okay. And, setting everything up around the playoff structure, and it's all about the postseason and all this sort of stuff, that's good and fine if you want to do that. I am not in that camp. Because you were devaluing the regular season, which is always what has made college football the greatest sport in the world. But nevertheless, we've got 1 year left in this 4-team format, and I look at the teams in the Pac-12 that are going to vie for a conference championship. USC, they're the favorite. Utah, they're the 2-time defending champs. Oregon and Washington have teams that are capable of winning the conference. UCLA, Oregon State, trying to work themselves into that category and win the conference for the first time, which they have never done. Those are all teams that I look at and say, they're good. I might even look at some of those teams and say, they're really good. But when I look at those teams and compare them to the schools they have to go up against, within the conference specifically, I don't know that I see a dominant team in there. Sure, you could look at USC. You absolutely could. Who came up short a year ago. Are they better? Yeah. You could say with the addition of Bear Alexander and Anthony Lucas on the defensive line, they're better in that sense. Okay, I will grant you that. But is it enough? When you look at their schedule, which factors into this heavily when I'm forming my opinion on can the Pac-12 get a team to the playoff, you have to have a team that when you look at their schedule, you say, I see 12-1. Because that's what you need. You got to have 12-1 or 13-0. And 13-0 is pretty darn tough. We have not, fun fact, we have not in the Pac-12, not 10, 12 era, we have not had a single solitary team go unbeaten in conference play. So that means that unless someone were to accomplish that, which is in theory possible, though exceedingly difficult, if someone accomplishes that, they then have to have no more than one loss in their non-conference. And also, the non-conference loss has to be quality, and you have to have enough quality wins on your conference slate to get you above other teams that are going to be vying for a 14 playoff spot. So, one of the reasons I feel this way, that the Pac-12 will not be sending a team to the college football playoff this year, which I think is fine, because it can still be a really fun, entertaining season, and also, I am sometimes wrong. Sometimes, not often. I look at the teams that have a chance to go 12-1 or 13-0, and it's just really hard to see, boy, a lot of things would have to go right there. So let's start with USC. They'd be the most likely pick. I think they're the most likely team to get into the playoff because they have a great coach who has been there before, and they have the best quarterback in the country, probably the best player in the country in Caleb Williams. USC has to play Utah. They have to play UCLA. They have to play Washington. They have to play Oregon. They have to play Notre Dame, which you have to consider if you're talking about going to the playoff, not winning the Pac-12, but going to the playoff. They have to play Notre Dame, and they have to play the Pac-12 championship game. So in those 6 games, right, let's assume no other stumbles, which, by the way, it's not a given. This is the Pac-12 we're talking about. We shoot ourselves in the foot regularly for getting a team into the playoff. We like to get right up to conference championship week. Win and you're in. USC last year, Utah 2019. This stuff happens all the time. Heck, Washington State, we all forget, once upon a time, was top 10 in the country, 10-1, going into the Apple Cup at home against Washington. Yeah, they lost the game. They could have put themselves into the conference championship game. They could have put themselves into the college football playoff discussion, but they lost the Apple Cup. And then Washington went on to win the Pac-12, went to the Rose Bowl, lost to Ohio State. I believe I have those years correct. But anyway, so my point is that when you look at each of these contending teams, USC has to play that lineup of teams and the Pac-12 championship game, which is probably going to be a second matchup against one of the teams that I listed, or you're playing another good team. Utah has got the most brutal schedule of all. I mean, this is just, if this is the year that Utah breaks through and goes to the playoff, it would be one of the more surprising years, I think. Not because they aren't a good team, but because of the gauntlet of a schedule they have set up for them. It would be probably the most surprising playoff run outside of TCU. Because, and Cincinnati maybe. Cincinnati as well. Because Utah has to play USC and UCLA. They have to play Oregon State. They have to play Oregon as well. Oh, by the way, they have to play Washington. Oh, and by the way, their non-conference has got a pair of Power 5 teams in Florida and Baylor. Florida's at home week 1. Baylor is on the road week 2 down in Waco. And they'd have to play the Pac-12 championship game. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games where they'd have to go 7-1, where you could argue that they're going to be an underdog, or it's a coin flip, or they're a small favorite. Go either way games. It's really, really tough. And it's tough for other teams as well. But betting on FanDuel is easy for all of you. You can take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel if you haven't already and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run to which Pac-12 team is going over or under their win total this year. You know I love Cal over 4.5. There are other ones you can bet. There are individual game spreads you can bet because we're that close to the college football season. You want to get in on all that action, you want to check out FanDuel. It's all taking place on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use, and you get paid instantly. FanDuel's America's #1 sports book, so sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. The second segment sip just never fails. Never fails to rejuvenate my vocal cords. Anyway, enough about that. Moving on to teams that could, in theory, where I could lay out an argument. I could go through for any of these teams, except I'm not putting UCLA in here because I'm kind of down on UCLA football relative to what the expectations could be and where their win total is at. The teams that could, in theory, get to the playoff, I can see how it could happen. I just don't think it's going to happen because there are a lot of really good teams, but you need a dominant team. Right? Washington, 2016, was pretty close to a dominant team in the Pac-12. Oregon, 2014, had the Heisman Trophy winner in Marcus Mariota. Teams that have knocked on the door. Utah, dominant defense in 2019, still couldn't get there, lost to Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. Oregon was in position to go to the playoff in 2021. Then Utah came along late in the year and punched them in the mouth twice in 3 weeks. USC a year ago would have gotten to the playoff if that pesky Utah team hadn't gotten in the way. By the way, they're on their schedule once again. That's going to be a fun game. But so, looking at Oregon's schedule, they have to play at Texas Tech, which, by the way, is not going to be an easy game. They're only a 3.5-point favorite in Lubbock. Early season, positive momentum around the Texas Tech program. They've got a decent amount of returning talent, including their quarterback and former Oregon Duck Tyler Shuck. So they've got a returning signal caller from an 8-5 team. You're playing on the road early in the season. Nothing about that is easy. They have to play Texas Tech. They have to play at Washington. They get USC at home, at Utah, Oregon State at home, and the Pac-12 championship game. Is it impossible that the Ducks go 5-1 against those 6 opponents or in those 6 games and undefeated in the rest of the slate? No, it's not impossible, but it's so gosh darn tough. Like, these schools would have an easier time if this was the ACC or if this was the Big 12, because I don't think you have the depth of top tier talent in those leagues the way you do in the Pac-12. Heck, I don't even know if the Big 10 has this sort of depth, because it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Penn State. There's usually a drop off there. You got 5 teams that I could readily make a case logically and supported by data and sound reasoning can win the conference championship this year. Can you do that in the Big Ten? Can you even do that in the SEC? Probably Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Tennessee. I don't know if they go 5 deep in the SEC. Now, this is Locked On Pac-12, not Locked On SEC, so maybe I'd have to ask my guy Chris Gordy about that. But Oregon's got 6 games that can go either way, toss up, or they'd be an underdog. Washington plays Michigan State. Now, they're pretty heavy favorites in that game. 11.5-point road favorites in East Lansing. That's a lot. They could still lose that game. It's not a toss-up, though. It's not going to be an easy game, though, because it's early in the season. Both teams probably going to be 2-0, playing for a lot. Michigan State very motivated after what happened last year in Seattle, you would think. So they've got Michigan State. Not going to be a cakewalk, though I expect them to win. Oregon, you get them at home. USC, Utah, they have to play Oregon State and the Pac-12 championship game. So again, that's 6 games that are going to be really, really tough. And I'm not saying these teams are going to go, they're all going to go 3-3 in these games or 2-4, right? And the last team I want to mention here is Oregon State, because they play Utah, UCLA, Washington, Oregon, and the Pac-12 championship game. They have the easiest schedule of the bunch, by the way. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just throwing it out there. Oregon State's got Utah, UCLA, and Washington all at home. They miss USC, and yes, they have Oregon at the end of the year. But if you're telling me just talking about Pac-12 championship here, not getting to the playoff, 7-2 is going to get you into the conference title game, which it usually does depending on the tiebreakers, hard to not like Oregon State right there. Anyway, plus they've only got 5 of those games and 3 of them are home. Anyway, so if you're talking about any of those teams going 12-1, just ask yourself, who's going 5-1 or 6-1 or whatever it is in that stretch of games? Oregon State, by the way, would only have to go 4-1. They'd have to take care of business elsewhere. But these teams are good enough to do that. Not impossible, but not easy. Oregon State, with those 5 games, has to go 4-1. Washington, with those 6 games, got to go 5-1. Utah's got to go 7-1 in this stretch. And it's just, I feel like it is asking a lot. And that's why I think the Pac-12, once again, is going to miss the playoff this year. But drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments below or hit me up on Twitter at Smalls_55 or at LO_Pac-12. DMs and mentions always wide open all the time. Let's go talk about Arizona. Not a Pac-12 contender this year. Don't sleep on them in the coming years, though. I'm just saying, don't say I didn't warn you. This question from Vorlon Angel, whatever that means. Quick question. It's not a quick question, but like it's a quick question. Did Arizona change its defensive coordinator? I just saw that in every loss they had last year, that D gave up a minimum of 31 points. They gave up 39 to Mississippi State, 49 against Cal, Oregon, and Washington, 45 against USC and Utah, 31 to Washington State. Now that is a bad defense. Fact check true. It was a bad defense for Arizona last year. And yet they were 1 game away from being bowl eligible. How about that? Getting 4- and 5-star defensive players is great, but if the DC is the same, so will be the results. Oh, before I forget, I wonder what Coach Jed Fish told the kid with regard to which conference Arizona will be playing in starting in 2024. What do I mean by that? See his recent interview on his thoughts on realignment and where Arizona will be once it shakes out. By the way, just to sum up real quick, Jed Fish's comments were he tells recruits Arizona's going to have a home because, newsflash, Arizona is going to have a home. This is not breaking news. If the Pac-12 gets a sufficiently valuable deal, they'll stay with the Pac-12. If it's way off the mark, they can go to the Big 12, and the Big 12 will welcome them with open arms. Not that complicated. Anyway, back to the football question, which is mildly complicated here. Arizona's defensive stats in 2020-22 were, to put it kindly, pretty putrid. They were 11th in the Pac-12 in points per game allowed. They were 11th in yards per game allowed. And, as he points out, they allowed some big numbers in all their losses. Now, they were able to score points, and they're going to be able to score points again. So the question for Arizona is, how do you get better in one season on the defensive side of the ball? Now, let's put our thinking caps on for just a moment and ask ourselves, how in the world of college football in 2023 can you readily and in one offseason improve or transform yourself on one side of the ball? Are there any kind of like new trends or vehicles that you can utilize to maybe like get a bunch of new players? Oh boy, let me think. Oh, hey, there's always the transfer portal. There are actually 2 ways to do this, like on a serious note. The portal is a great way to completely change yourself on one side of the ball. Hiring the right coach is another. Look at Oregon State with Trent Bray. A lot of the same players from the 2021 team. But that 2022 defense for the Bees took a massive step forward and was one of the best in the Pac-12 and one of the best in the country because they implemented a new system there with Trent Bray as a defensive coordinator, who was their linebackers coach. And that was the right move. That was clearly the right move because things went really, really well. And that team actually changed their identity from an offensive-led team to kind of a defensive-led team. And the offense just needed to complement what the defense was doing. That was a big shift from what Oregon State was doing in 2021 when they, for example, lost to a 4-8 Colorado team because they couldn't get a stop to save their lives. That was a big, big shift. But back to my sarcastic point. The portal, only semi-sarcastic, the portal is a great, great tool if you have one side of the ball that needs a lot of help. And Arizona, defensively, needs a lot of help. Their offense, not so much. A couple more offensive linemen might do them some good. They don't need to run the ball as well as Oregon State or Utah or Oregon did last year. They're a pass-first offense, and that's okay. because they have a quarterback who can be productive and they have really good wide receivers. But the question is on defense. So what have they done defensively? Did they change their defensive coordinator? No, they did not. Now, I ask you to just ponder this when you're considering, well, they have the same defense coordinator. Okay, valid. Has he been a defensive coordinator previously so we know kind of what to expect in terms of year-over-year growth? Answer, no. Johnny Nansen is not. That's Arizona's defensive coordinator. This is different with a guy like Alex Grinch, where I've seen him at Oklahoma, see him at USC, and it's a lot of kind of the same stuff. Never had an elite defense, not able to get a lot of stops. That's just kind of what you expect. But for Arizona and Johnny Nansen, we don't know what to expect there. We don't know what he can be as a defensive coordinator. He hasn't had an insane amount of time. He has had some time. And the early results, not incredible, because they actually got worse from 2021, where they allowed 372 yards a game and 31 points per game. Those numbers went up to 36.5 points per game and about 468 yards per in 2022. So what has Johnny Nansen done as a result? What has Jed Fish done as well? They've gone to the portal and said, yeah, we need more guys here. We need better players. And they have added not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, but 7 Power 5 transfers on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of them in the trenches where they got gashed a year ago. They really struggled stopping the run. If you remember that Cal game when they lost, I think it was 49-31, Jaden Ott went for like 200-something yards. Now, Jaden Ott at Cal is a very, very good back. He shouldn't be going for over 200 yards against your defense there. Offense played well, but the defense wasn't able to get nearly enough stops to win that football game. So when you look at what they've done, a couple notable transfers in there that I think, or that I suspect, as you know, an outsider to the Arizona program, relatively speaking, are going to be impactful players. Justin Flo from Oregon, former 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He was actually the second highest rated recruit in Oregon history, battled injuries while with the Ducks, still has some upside, still has, some high physical traits that I don't know if he's quite the athlete he was when he was coming out of high school because he battled injuries for 2 seasons before he actually started playing regularly a season ago, and he struggled, but maybe he just needs a new environment. That has happened on more than one occasion. Daniel Haimuli, another linebacker who was originally at Washington, was a 4-star recruit there, and is now with Arizona. Of the 7 Power 5 defensive transfers, 4 of them were a 4 or 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Those are the sorts of body types that you are looking for to bulk up on that side of the ball, which is absolutely what Arizona needs to do. So if they can improve with the personnel that they have brought in, which they have, if the scheme can now match the jump in personnel and get greater production out of there, then yeah, Arizona's defense could be better. They had the 11th best defense in 2022, and they went 5-7. Imagine if they had the 7th best defense. Not the first, not the second, not the third, not the just the. What if they were middle of the conference? What would that have been last year? A 7, 8, 9 win team? I don't know, but it would have been more than 5. It would have been a lot more than 5. And that's what you need to do when you are struggling on one side of the ball. Go get the best players you can find, and I think they have done that, and I'm curious to see what happens. Also, by the way, they lost Dorian Singer this offseason. You know what a great replacement is? Montana Lamonius Craig. Don't sleep on that name. Wide receiver at Colorado, who had that big spring game performance and then transferred afterwards. Losing Dorian Singer to USC, that stung a little bit. But when you add Lamonius Craig, and you pair him with Jacob Cowing and Tetairoa McMillan, yeah, that's an elite cadre of wide receivers for Jaden Delore. They should be a wildly productive offense. And if that defense can make strides, just go from 36 points a game to 32. Just go from 468 yards a game to 415, 420, whatever you want. Somewhere in that range. Just make strides. And you'll see the results follow with the win-loss record. So, last thing to talk about today. Another mailbag question. This one from Nate. Hey, man. Hello, Nate. By the way, I laugh at the name Nate, not because it's an inherently funny name, but because I love this comedian. His name is Nate Bargatze. He's very funny. And he has this bit about going to an airport and he hands his ID to the TSA guy and he goes, "This is not good." Says your ID doesn't match your name on your ticket because his name is Nathan on the ticket and it's Nathaniel on the ID. It's a very funny bit. Go look it up. So anyway, that's why I was laughing. Anyway, hey man, Josh Pate recently had a show where he was talking about the possibility of the Saudis coming into college football and investing in a conference, i.e. the Pac, while we are without a media deal. Similar to what we saw happen with LIV Golf. Do you think this could be a possibility to push the Pac over the finish line with a media deal and potentially keep the conference together? All speculation at this point, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. Thanks. So, no for this deal. I think we're too far into the process. Now, if you want to put on your tinfoil hat, you could say, well, that's why they're being so secretive. That's why they're not saying anything. They don't want these reports. They want to just drop it on people. Like, okay, I'm sure some people can think that, or you can talk yourself into that reality. Do whatever you want. As Adam Savage of Mythbusters used to say, I reserve the right to reject your reality and substitute my own. You do whatever you want. So I don't think right now this is imminent. But in theory, the idea of the Saudis getting involved in college football, to me, is not even close to being out of the realm of possibility. Meaning, I believe it is a possibility. Now, we haven't seen anything at this time, and it's unclear how something like that could possibly work. Because when the Saudis put their money behind LIV Golf, you know one thing they were not getting and why they ended up merging with the PGA Tour? They didn't have credibility and they didn't have a great media deal. They were on the CW, but they didn't have the traditional partners, and it was not the sort of broadcast deal that they really wanted. And so that's part of the reason they are, now going to latch on with the PGA Tour, because that's the best broadcast setup. So I don't think they could be helpful with that. But just the mere notion of the Saudis being involved in college sports, after seeing what's happened here with the PGA Tour, I think Pate is correct, because I don't know how you could rule it out entirely in good faith and say, no, that'll never happen. That could never come to college sports. Why? In a world in which the Saudis have a desire to pursue sports washing, because that is what they are doing, and where they have seemingly an unlimited amount of money, at least compared to some of the entities that, they're competing with on the PGA Tour specifically, but basically anybody else. And when you consider that college sports is a world of the haves and have-nots, and the have-nots specifically don't have as much money as other places, if there is the old expression, money talks and you know what walks. And if they decided we want to be involved in the college football world, we want to be a big donor to a university, we want to boost the funding to an athletic program, we want to have influence there, we want to have this, that, I don't know what the framework would look like. I don't know exactly how they would get involved. But the notion that they would have no desire to, that it wouldn't be beneficial for them and the causes that they are pursuing in the sports and media realm right now, I don't see how that argument bears any fruit. Because I think it is absolutely in line with what they want. And if they're seeking exposure, credibility, respect, involvement, whatever, what's a bigger community setting than football in America? It's the most watched sport in the country. It's the NFL one. It's college football too. College football draws crazy big numbers. And so in a world where you have institutions that are oftentimes more strapped for cash than others who they are trying to compete with, could I see a school? I don't know what school specifically, but generally, does the idea make sense in my head that a school could say, hey, it's not great, but all this money is really going to help our athletic department, and we're going to be able to get better equipment or get more money for these programs that are football and non-football and everybody like that, and pay coaches more and attract the best coaches and boost our NIL collectors or whatever, yeah, of course I could see that happening. Is it imminent? Doesn't appear to be. But if you told me 5 years from now, they had migrated themselves into the college football world in some capacity, yeah, I could see it. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.